I'm going to choose a room that's about 250 square feet. In the middle of the new room, with the smell of fresh wood in the air, Lucas said with a joyful laugh. I stopped unpacking. Is she going for a room that's about 250 square feet? What in the world is Jessica talking about? I'm taking this corner room, Lucas announced, making me even more unable to grasp the situation. If you defy me, I won't be taking care of you, Lucas declared with a sneer, glaring at me. But inside, my mind was still in chaos. Huh? Whose house are we talking about? Feeling that something wasn't adding up with my eldest son and his wife, I questioned them. Huh? What? They both gave me a vacant look, and finally, I began to understand the situation. Ah, I see. That's what this is about. This could be a good opportunity to set things straight with my eldest son, Lucas, and his wife, Jessica, who have been running me ragged for years. I must not let this chance pass by. Alone, I felt a fiery determination inside me. My name is Catherine Thompson. I'm turning 65 this year. My husband passed away from pancreatic cancer 5 years ago. By the time the cancer was found, it was too late, and he passed away a few months later. The abruptness of it all left me unable to catch up emotionally, and for a while, I lived like a shell of a person, just eating, going to the bathroom, and bathing, simply passing the days. Lately, my legs have been getting worse, making it hard to live on my own. It was my eldest son, Lucas, who brought a ray of hope into my wilted life. That year, Lucas was getting married and he and his fiancée, Jessica, expressed a desire to live with me. I was taken aback when Lucas suddenly brought up cohabitation. Up to that point, he had been living in the company housing provided by the regional bank he worked for. I had simply assumed that they would naturally set up their own place once married. But contrary to my expectations, my son and his wife-to-be wanted to live with me. I hadn't even met Jessica yet, and I didn't know anything about her. But for me, having lost the love of my life and feeling a gaping hole in my heart, Lucas's offer to live together felt like a consolation sent from God. Of course, I'll contribute to the household expenses. Oh, I'm fine with it. I found myself quickly agreeing before I knew it, and Lucas smiled with satisfaction. Got it. Then I'll bring Jessica over next week. Take care, he said, and with those words, Lucas left. Despite his somewhat rough personality, I always thought that was just because he was in front of his parents, maybe showing some rebellion. To me, he was still my dear child. I felt as if my once lonely life had suddenly been illuminated. A week later, as promised, eldest son couple came to our house. Here we are. Despite it being our first meeting, I was surprised by how Jessica confidently strode in, her footsteps echoing loudly. Despite being the same age as Lucas, 30 years old, she wore a skirt shorter than knee length, her hair was dyed pink. And her nails were glittery and flamboyant. Nice to meet you. You're Jessica, right? Yeah, that's me. But, what's with this house? It's kinda run down and small, isn't it? I was taken aback as Jessica entered the house and immediately started criticizing it without even a proper greeting. That's true. But it's better than nothing, so bear with it. Sure. Lucas retorted with a dismissive tone, which confused me even more since just a week ago he had been so keen on moving in. Despite the sudden rudeness, I reminded myself that we were going to be living together from now on, and I didn't want to start off on the wrong foot. So, I sat Lucas and Jessica down and served them some tea. Do you work, Jessica? There's no way I'm working, it's just too much hassle. Oh, I see. And what about you, do you work? No, I've been a homemaker. Wow, so you're living off your husband's pension? Must be nice. You can just live it up without working a day. Despite both of us being homemakers, I looked at Jessica in disbelief as she sarcastically laughed and called my situation quite the nice position. I do receive a survivor's pension, but that's my only income. It's nowhere near enough for a luxurious life, I'm just getting by day to day. Living leisurely is nothing but a pipe dream. More importantly, Jessica, how should we divide the household chores? Since we're both homemakers, maybe we can split them equally? Wanting to change the subject, I proposed this to Jessica. Living together means the three of us supporting and helping each other out in our daily lives. I assumed that since Lucas would be working during the day and contributing financially, Jessica would be willing to help with the chores. However, she frowned visibly at my suggestion. Divide the chores? No way, you should handle all that. I don't know anything about this house. Plus, I'm busy hanging out with friends. With that sharp retort, Jessica looked at me with a piercing gaze as if dumping all the responsibilities on me. Well, then, just help out whenever you can, please. I couldn't ask too much of Jessica since we had just met today, so I ended up conceding on the issue of chores. Jessica wore a smirk as if she had one. I felt overwhelmed and dismayed thinking about our future life together. Living with 3 other people was a far cry from the married life I had initially imagined. First off, Lucas would say he's too busy with work and wouldn't come home until late at night. True to her initial declaration, Jessica didn't do any household chores. I thought she might at least be able to take out the trash, but she seemed to have trouble getting up in the morning and couldn't manage to do it on time. Reluctantly, I found myself doing all the housework for 3. Before moving in together, I thought this would fill the void of missing my husband, but now I regretted it, thinking maybe I was better off alone. Jessica wasn't just neglecting the household chores, she was out and about every day. Given her flashy appearance, I had suspected she might be a bit wild, but to be out playing every day really was quite the nice position indeed. Every time Jessica came home, she was always carrying shopping bags from well-known international brands. These were brands that sold luxury items I could never afford on my pension. When I asked, "How did you afford these?" she laughed through her nose and said, "Obviously, I bought them with my allowance." However, I knew Lucas's salary wasn't high enough to afford multiple high-end brand items. If Jessica had been saving up her allowance bit by bit to buy these things, I could understand, but buying brand-name items nearly every day doesn't leave room to save. I wondered where she could possibly be getting so much money. And there was another unexpected issue for me. Lucas wasn't contributing financially to the household. About a month after we started living together, I thought Lucas would have transferred some of his salary into our household account by now, so I checked at the bank. But there was no money from Lucas. Before we started living together, I remembered Lucas saying, "I'll contribute financially to the household." Well, it's only been a month, maybe he's just late or forgot, I thought, and went home without much suspicion that day. However, as 2 months, then 3 months passed, there was still no financial contribution from Lucas. I finally decided to tell him that it was impossible to cover the living expenses for 3 people with just my pension. Could you contribute a little to the household? The budget for groceries is really tight. Ah, sorry, I forgot. I'll make sure to put in some next time. Hearing the words "I forgot," I felt relieved and believed that Lucas would start contributing financially from next month. However, his promise seemed to be just an excuse to placate a child, and he never actually made the transfer. I pleaded with Lucas several times, but he was usually drunk by the time he got home and quickly forgot what I had said. Or perhaps he was pretending to forget. When it became clear that I wouldn't receive any money from Lucas, I had no choice but to find a part-time job. I started working at a local flower shop. Returning to work after so long was exciting, but the long hours were tough on my body, which was already past retirement age. Still, the pressure of earning enough to support 3 people weighed heavily on me. I worked 6 to 8 hours during the day, similar to a full-time job, then came home to prepare dinner for 3. Jessica, as usual, did not start helping with the chores even though I had begun working. On the contrary, she would throw tantrums over the meals I cooked, like a small child. One evening, she flipped her plate over and exclaimed, "What is this? It tastes awful. I wanted curry. Make it again." It wasn't just one day that such incidents occurred. Again and again, Jessica would find fault with the meals I prepared based on her mood for the day. I felt a surge of anger and sadness, but realized that arguing with the unreasonable Jessica was futile, so I silently remade the meal. I wanted to break free from this life that felt like slavery. I can't go on like this. Instinctively, I knew I couldn't go on like this. So, I decided to find a hobby to distract myself and asked the manager of the flower shop, "Can you think of any hobbies I could do at home?" The manager, Mrs. Smith, was a young woman in her 40s who you could tell must have been very beautiful in her 20s, fitting the image of a florist perfectly. "How about something handmade? You're welcome to use the flowers that we're going to discard." Following the manager's advice, I decided to make jewelry using flowers. Making jewelry was a lot of fun. I was naturally skilled with my hands and quickly got the hang of making jewelry that looked just as good as what you'd find in a store. The manager, who was knowledgeable, even showed me a site where I could sell my handmade creations. Just out of curiosity, I put the jewelry I made up for sale on a website. Just out of curiosity, I posted some of my jewelry on the selling site, and within a week, orders started coming in, and I began to earn an income from it. The joy of earning money from a hobby was exhilarating, and I made jewelry in every spare moment I had. Jessica scoffed at my efforts, saying, "What's this? People actually buy these?" But I ignored her. When she realized I wasn't paying attention to her, she tried to annoy me by saying, "You're just like a burden to society, an old person who's useless." But I didn't react to that either. No matter what Jessica said, I wasn't afraid anymore. 5 years had passed since I started making jewelry, and I turned 65. Recently, I bought a house nearby. I loved the house I was living in because of the memories with my husband, but it was getting old, and everything was starting to fall apart. So I was satisfied to be able to buy a new house. And as I was thinking about living there without my eldest son couple, Jessica peeked over my shoulder at the floor plan of my new home. "Wow, is this a new house? What's this, are you moving?" Jessica exclaimed with a cheerfulness I had never heard from her before. Looking at floor plans is indeed fun, and I like it too, but I never imagined that Jessica, who always seemed so angry, would get this excited. "Yes, that's right. Wow, it's really big." Jessica was absorbed in the floor plan, forgetting herself. For the first time in 5 years of living together, I saw a childlike side to Jessica. After that, I was busy buying furniture for the new house and packing up for the move. Lucas and Jessica, as usual, did whatever they pleased, paying no mind to my busyness. On the day of the move, I had asked some acquaintances to help with the big items, so I left the house with just one suitcase. "The new house is big, isn't it?" "It's spacious, I've seen the layout." The eldest son couple seemed eager to see the new house, and they were more excited than usual. I took Lucas and Jessica to the new home. Upon seeing the stylish black exterior, wooden door, and the large garden, both of them exclaimed, "Wow!" The garden was my own personal touch, something I insisted on for my hobby of growing flowers. When we entered, the expansive room spread out before us, and I felt very satisfied. Having bad knees, I made sure the house was single-story and had handrails installed, which turned out to be the right decision. "Whoa! It's super spacious and super clean." "It's more than I expected." The two of them, eyes sparkling as if they owned the place, walked around the house while I was unpacking, cheering every now and then. That's when I began to feel a sense of unease, thinking, After they had looked through all the rooms, they came back to where I was. "I'm going to choose a room that's about 250 square feet. In the middle of the new room, with the smell of fresh wood in the air, Jessica said with a joyful laugh. I stopped unpacking. Is she going for a room that's about 250 square feet? What in the world is Jessica talking about? "I'm taking this corner room," Lucas announced, making me even more unable to grasp the situation. "If you defy me, I won't be taking care of you," Lucas declared with a sneer, glaring at me. But inside, my mind was still in chaos. "Whose house are we talking about?" Feeling that something wasn't adding up with my eldest son and his wife, I questioned them. Huh? What? They both gave me a vacant look, and finally, I began to understand the situation. Ah, I see. That's what this is about. This could be a good opportunity to set things straight with my eldest son, Lucas, and his wife, Jessica, who have been running me ragged for years. I must not let this chance pass by. Alone, I felt a fiery determination inside me. I bought this house for myself. I explained the reasons for buying the house to my eldest son and his wife, who were standing there in front of me. I told them about the original house deteriorating with age, my thoughts on wanting to end our cohabitation, and how I considered that it might be more comfortable for Lucas and Jessica to live on their own without me.
Ending the cohabitation? What are you talking about? Yes. I haven't heard anything about this. I thought we were going to live in this house.
The two were bewildered by my confession. From my perspective, I couldn't comprehend the nerve of eldest son couple, who seemed intent on living with me indefinitely. Moreover, I never said a single word about us living together in this new house. If we were going to live together, I surely would have consulted them about the floor plan to some extent. I hadn't discussed anything about the house with my eldest son couple, so the fact that they assumed they would be living here too was a real surprise.
I'm sorry if it wasn't clear, but I thought if I explained it in detail, you might insist on coming along. And since I was only packing my things, I thought you would have realized. Even today, I assumed you were just coming to see my new place. After all, Jessica, you dislike everything about my cooking and cleaning, don't you? I never thought that you would actually want to continue living with me.
When I said that, heavy with irony, Jessica was at a loss for words, uttering only a stifled
But that's weird. How come you have the money to buy such a house? I've looked through the household account as much as I could and never saw that kind of money. Never mind.
Lucas's face turned pale as if he had let something slip by accident. I was aware that Lucas had been taking money from the household funds. I had stayed silent because I was waiting to see when Lucas would reflect on his actions. If he had shown even the slightest hint of remorse, I might have consulted him about the new house. But Lucas hadn't just failed to contribute financially to the house, he had been using the household money for himself, so I had resolved not to hold back anymore. I earned the money myself. It was about 5 years ago, I think. I started making jewelry as a hobby, remember? The florist manager suggested it to me. Initially, I was just selling a little bit on a sales website, but then a famous influencer featured my jewelry on their social media. After that, my creations started selling like crazy, and my income increased significantly. Yes. The reason I, who was living on a pension, could afford a house was because of my success in selling jewelry. Of course, even with the buzz, jewelry sales alone wouldn't have made enough money to buy a house. I received invitations from various apparel and jewelry companies, participated in tie-up projects, and got advertisements. I wanted to use the substantial amount of money I earned, which I couldn't have achieved with just my part-time job, to buy a new house because of the strained living situation with my eldest son couple.
It's a lie! There's no way you can earn money like that!
Jessica screamed in denial of the reality. Up to this year, when she turned 35, Jessica had hardly ever worked. Yet she was always splurging on luxury brands, indulging in extravagance. It was no surprise that someone like her couldn't understand how to earn money. I know about you, Jessica. I heard you dropped out of high school, had a fight with your parents, and ran away from home. You were homeless, lied about your age to work nights, right? I can sympathize with that, even if it wasn't the right thing to do. But after quitting that job, just wandering around aimlessly, hanging out with bad influences, splurging on luxury items, and then it even led to shoplifting, didn't it?
No!
Jessica's face showed shock, clearly not expecting me to confront her about shoplifting. I had suspected Jessica of shoplifting about a year after we started living together. I always thought it was strange that she was wearing only luxury items right from the start. There's no way Lucas's salary could cover the cost of such high-end brands. I immediately suspected shoplifting. One afternoon, when Jessica went out, I discreetly followed her and, sure enough, she was guilty. I could have confronted her right there and then, but knowing Jessica, she would have likely talked her way out of it. So, I decided to record evidence of her shoplifting on my phone, thinking that if she didn't change her ways, I would turn it over to the police someday. I have proof. Look, I said, showing her the video. Jessica's face tensed even more upon seeing it. With the evidence before her, she couldn't say anything in return and just hung her head low.
And Lucas, stealing money from the bank where you work, that's just the lowest of the low. You must have been in debt, right? How did you know that, Mom?
Now it was Lucas who started to tremble. To them, I must have seemed like a police officer about to question them about the crimes they had committed.
You see, the daughter of my florist's manager just started working as a new graduate at the same company as you this year, in the same department, no less. She told me that she saw you pocketing the money that customers entrusted to the bank. Being new and worried about making a false accusation against a senior, she hasn't spoken up about it to anyone. But I've thought to myself, if anyone at that bank would steal their own company's money, it would be you.
This is what I heard, so there's no evidence, but given that Lucas was giving Jessica a substantial allowance every month, never contributing any money to the house, and actually stealing from the household funds, it seemed likely to be true.
That's Smith. I educated her thoroughly, yet she's so ungrateful.
Lucas fumed, shaking with anger at the manager's daughter's betrayal. Hearing Lucas's words, I took it as an admission of his theft and seized the moment to lash out.
You educated her? You probably thought you were the most important person in this house, didn't you? Acting all high and mighty at work too, looking down on everyone else.
But too bad. That won't work with me.
This house is a prime example. I earned the money and bought this house with my own effort.
You're not the great one here.
Of course, I'm not saying I am either, but at least I won't let a house that I bought with money I worked hard for be taken away by you too.
Now, please leave immediately. My scream sent Lucas and Jessica fleeing from the house in terror. I breathed a sigh of relief. From tomorrow, I would no longer have to see those two. Just the thought made my heart feel lighter. Later, I reported Lucas and Jessica's crimes to the police. The police immediately looked into it. And frankly, there wasn't much to investigate. The evidence of Jessica's shoplifting and Lucas's theft was clear as day on the security cameras. They were taken away by the police without any fuss, and seeing my child and his wife being led away, I felt no stir of emotion. I could only think they had to fend for themselves now. Initially, I was pleased with my son and his wife's intentions to comfort me when we started living together, but as I lived with these two who did as they pleased, my stress accumulated. In retrospect, it's clear that when they brought up living with me, their true goal was to have me do all the housework while they lived comfortably. Saying goodbye to a life of being insulted and having money taken by Lucas and Jessica, I now feel refreshed. Even if they are released by the police, they'll be too busy paying off their debts. I'm certain their marriage will fall apart, given they can barely manage household chores. But I am resolute in my decision not to help them ever again. I've vowed to lead a life free from any ties to my eldest son and his wife. While continuing my part-time job at the flower shop, I've been putting even more effort into making jewelry. When I revealed that the flowers used in my jewelry came from the flower shop where I work, an unprecedented number of customers started to visit. Responding to customers' requests to use flowers as parts for their jewelry, I also began selling flowers specifically for this purpose. Manager showed concern, saying, "If your jewelry business is that successful, you could just focus on that," but I shook my head. After all, it was a hobby recommended to me by Manager Smith. I believe if using flowers from the florist in my jewelry helps the shop flourish, then that's the best outcome. I plan to continue walking this new path in life, enriched by both my work and my hobby.
Looks like a limited edition accessory. Why does my younger sister-in-law have something like this? More importantly, Respect your own sister over some other woman, you stupid brother.
On the day of the wedding, during the spare time before the ceremony, I tried to calm my nerves by watching my cat through a pet camera. However, what the pet camera showed was not my beloved cat, but my dolled-up sister-in-law who was attending our wedding. Unaware of the pet camera in the room, she was freely rummaging through my personal belongings. When I showed this to my husband, he blew up like a hot water heater and charged into the room where his relatives were waiting. Broadcasting the live footage to the entire family, my sister-in-law was caught humming a tune while voicing her grievances about my husband and trying on my personal items. Upon seeing her outrageous behavior, my in-laws turned pale and rushed out in a hurry. Minutes later, a devastating comeuppance was in store for my sister-in-law, who thought she had not been caught and took bold actions. I have been working at the company I joined in my final year of university for 3 years. About 2 years after I started working, a male colleague, whom I began to regard as more than a friend, confessed his desire for a serious relationship with the intent of marriage. I accepted his proposal without hesitation. A year has passed since then, and we are now in full swing preparing for marriage. Our new home is located not far from my in-laws' place, and with the pretext of a wedding gift, both our parents contributed little by little, and we bought a pre-owned single-family home. The remaining amount of the purchase price was covered by a mortgage, but since both my husband and in-laws agreed I should keep working post-marriage, we were optimistic that working together would allow us to pay it off sooner. There was a reason for choosing a single-family home. I have an extraordinary love for cats, and I lived surrounded by several cats at my parents' home. When I decided to attend a university in another state and had to live alone, of course, I never considered parting from my cats. My parents strongly opposed me taking a cat with me to live alone, but I persuaded them by saying I would work part-time and take responsibility for it. In the end, I was only able to bring one cat from my parents' home, but I pride myself on not letting my cat feel deprived while I balanced my studies and part-time work. After graduation, I continued to live in the same pet-friendly apartment, but post-marriage, it was undeniable that the apartment was too small. I was very sad at the thought of possibly having to return my cat to my parents' house. To me, cats are almost like soulmates. Having my dear cat with me has allowed me to endure tough exams and overcome the loneliness of living alone for the first time. My husband was aware of my passion for cats even before we started dating, so he was okay with keeping a cat. However, it was challenging to find a pet-friendly apartment or condo. Finding a small space suitable for a single person wasn't too hard, but considering 2 adults and the possibility of children in the future, along with rent considerations, the search was proving difficult. One day, when we went to my in-laws' house for wedding introductions, I hit it off with my mother-in-law over our love of cats. My mother-in-law, though an in-law herself, was a local like my in-laws, so I thought she might have information on pet-friendly rentals and consulted with her. She was thrilled at the prospect of living with a cat and suggested, with much excitement, "Why don't you just buy a single-family home?" As it turns out, my mother-in-law loves cats and lived with them before marrying, but had to give up cohabiting with them after discovering my father-in-law's cat allergy. With this background and perhaps feeling a bit guilty, my father-in-law didn't argue against the idea and decided to help fund our home purchase. It didn't seem fair to rely only on my in-laws, so when I explained the situation to my parents, they offered to help for the sake of the cat. My father kept insisting it was strictly for the cat's benefit, but my mother told me, "He's just shy. Don't worry about it, it's a wedding gift," and shared a knowing smile. My dad has always been shy about expressing his true feelings, and it's not like he needed to be shy at a time like this, so my mother and I couldn't help but laugh together. Thus, with the help of our parents, we were able to settle on our new home much sooner than expected, and we decided to move before the wedding. My mother-in-law, who adores cats, is still in her youthful 50s. She works part-time on some days, takes up hobbies, and like clockwork, rejuvenates herself monthly at a cat cafe. Seeing how she's that kind of person, I thought our cat would warm up to her in no time. So I quickly invited her over to our new place, and to my surprise, our cat took to her more than I imagined, and she seemed to have a blast. Ever since then, she's been visiting frequently, not just to play with the cat but also to share long-lasting recipes and secretly spill the beans on my husband's favorite dishes. She really goes out of her way, and it has made my relationship with her very good. My husband and I are already living together in our new home, so it feels like married life has already started, even though the wedding is still ahead. We work at the same company, but once our marriage was decided, my husband got transferred to another department. It seems he had already requested a transfer, so he's pretty pumped about moving to the department he wanted. Our work start times are the same, but we come home at different hours. Whoever gets home first starts preparing dinner, and I think we're doing quite well at splitting the household chores down the middle. During the commute, my husband often reads the newspaper because of his job, while I've made it a routine to check on our cat through the pet camera I installed at home. Even in the crowded train, getting soothed by my cat cuts my stress in half. It's just one good thing after another. The conversation might jump around a bit, but when I went to my husband's family home to formally introduce myself, the in-laws weren't the only ones I met for the first time. I had heard about his unmarried sister since we started dating. My sister-in-law is quite the free spirit, with a passion for international travel. Instead of holding down a regular job, she does various part-time gigs to save up for her trips. Seems like she's living the dream. I always thought it was great to have passions, and folks with their own interests tend to respect each other's and get along just fine. So her not having a 9-to-5 or being spontaneous wasn't a big deal to me. Truth be told, my own decision to work full-time was largely to keep up a lifestyle surrounded by cats. And the appeal of having paid leave in case something happened to them was not lost on me. You don't usually get that with part-time jobs. I'm pretty keen on traveling myself. Back when I lived at home, I went on a few international family trips. Learning about unknown worlds is always a plus, and I figured I'd get along with my sister-in-law just fine. My husband, however, gave me an earful about how naive my thinking was. He vented about all the troubles he's had because of her. Like how his money would magically shrink, or how she'd dip into the savings he'd built up from his own part-time work. Thinking his piggy bank was too vulnerable, he had his folks set him up with his own bank account. But even then, it seemed she'd somehow withdraw from it without his consent. Back in the day, he used easy-to-remember pins, which pretty much gave her free rein. He said it felt just like being robbed. He was pretty steamed up, maybe reliving those emotions, because she also had a habit of using and breaking his stuff without asking. They seemed to be on pretty bad terms. There didn't seem to be any lies in my husband's side of the story, and it didn't sound exaggerated, but I didn't want to take sides and sour my relationship with my sister-in-law before it even started. While I nodded along with my husband, inside, I was reminding myself to stay neutral. But, boy, the sister-in-law I met was nothing like the picture my husband painted. She was something else entirely. After the introductions and self-introductions were done, and we began to dig deeper over dinner with the in-laws, she started talking about her hobbies and was super easy to talk to. Despite the friction with my husband, I felt as a fellow woman, we could make it work. She's in her early 30s but seems to see the world through rose-colored glasses, probably due to her carefree lifestyle. Then again, some people don't show their true selves and put on a facade. Was she on guard around me? Or was she playing up the unreliable angle out of consideration? That's what I was thinking. However, as the warm and friendly atmosphere of the gathering reached its later stages, my in-laws formally addressed the start of our family relations with words of encouragement. My mother-in-law, drawing from her experience, mentioned that it's tough to balance work and unfamiliar household chores, so she encouraged us to support each other. Ever since my husband decided to support my career continuation, he confidently assured that he could handle the household chores, having learned the ropes from his mother, who in turn was a bit worried and asked, "Really? If you ever need anything, don't hesitate to ask," they said, and the meet and greet for our wedding should have ended on a good note. That is, until my sister-in-law, oblivious to the mood, chimed in. "Both of you working means you'll be rolling in dough, right? You'll be saving up for a rainy day, huh?"
If I end up single and an old lady, you'll use that savings to take care of me, right? So, if I never marry, you guys have got my back, she said. The idea was that we should manage on my husband's salary alone, and save my entire paycheck so that if my sister-in-law never married and became elderly, we would use that money to support her. I was stunned. It took me a moment to comprehend what she had said, and I was at a loss for words. But my husband instantly got it. Are you kidding me? Why should we care about your retirement when you've chosen to live your life without planning for it? He snapped back. He made it clear that her disrespectful comment was none of our business and firmly put her in her place. The in-laws, too, were too flustered to laugh off such a remark and sent her out of the room, apologizing to us for her rudeness. After this incident, I consciously avoided any interaction with my sister-in-law. I believe everyone is free to choose their own path in life. But who would ask someone they've only met for a few hours to take care of them in their old age? Considering what my husband told me about his sister using his money and wages from his part-time jobs at will, I now felt she was targeting my income. She seemed all too eager to come to us with her hands out, and I couldn't bring myself to like her. She easily trampled over my intention to bridge the gap and get along well. Even if she said it was just a joke to lighten the mood, the atmosphere had already been pleasant, and such a tasteless joke isn't funny. She was just an immature child who couldn't read the room. Even after her outrageous outburst, I arranged to visit my in-laws' home when I knew my sister-in-law would be out working part-time. Thus, from the time of our initial meeting until the day of our wedding, I never saw her face again. Until the very end, my husband refused to let his sister attend the wedding. I understood his feelings, as I too didn't want any strange outbursts or behavior at our wedding. However, worried about what she might do if she wasn't invited, I convinced my husband that it would be better to have her there under someone's watchful eye. He reluctantly agreed to my suggestion. Frankly, I was also nervous about what she might do in front of my parents, relatives, and friends. The in-laws said they'd keep a close eye on her, so I had to trust that. But my sister-in-law managed to mess everything up with her outrageous actions. It wasn't just about us anymore. She had created a situation that involved the in-laws and all the relatives. After my husband and I arrived at the venue and changed in our respective dressing rooms, he came to mine. He was in a light-colored vest and morning suit, while I wore a white wedding dress that showed off my shoulders and back. The dress and veil were too long for me to move around on my own. It would be selfish of me to ask him to stay because I felt lonely since he had greetings to make with his work colleagues. So I was really happy when he came to my dressing room. The time until the start of the wedding ceremony also served as a solid time filler for me. It's not so much killing time, it has become a part of my daily routine. That meant checking on our beloved cat through the pet camera and getting that warm, fuzzy feeling. When my husband came in, I was just about to look through the camera on my phone. He had become quite the cat lover since we started living with one. "Do you want to watch together?" I asked, and he told me to go ahead. Apparently, he wasn't used to the morning suits he was wearing, and it seemed like that was the least of his concerns. Taking advantage of my husband's kindness, I peeked into the pet camera, but what was displayed was not my beloved cat, but my sister-in-law. We had received a message from my mother-in-law while we were moving to the venue. The gist of it was that she was going to bring my sister-in-law to the venue now. We had agreed to keep each other posted so my sister-in-law wouldn't cause trouble for other guests. My mother-in-law had assured us that since they were driving, there'd be no unsupervised actions, so we were at ease, but what was this all about? I called out to my husband loudly. At that moment, still unaware of the gravity of the situation, my husband naively remarked that I didn't need to shout to be heard. But he was speechless after seeing the live feed from the pet camera. Uncharacteristically, he let out a few expletives. It was clear his anger was too intense to contain. Then he spun on his heel and stormed out of the dressing room. I followed him in a hurry. Considering I was likely to trip in my heels, I kicked them off. Even if it looked undignified, I took off the meticulously set veil and boldly lifted the hem of my dress to run. My husband headed straight into the family's waiting room.
to give the out-of-town family a comfortable place to rest. Instead of the usual waiting room, a room spacious enough for a small banquet had been prepared. Thanks to its size, the room came with a large installed screen. When I caught up to my husband, the entire family was taken aback, not understanding his actions. He was saying something to his parents, but his anger was so intense that the subject of his sentences was missing. Noticing I had caught up, he asked to borrow my smartphone. With my phone, he projected the live feed from the pet camera onto the big screen and turned up the volume so everyone in the corner could hear. The screen showed my sister-in-law humming a tune while rummaging around the room. At first, my husband's relatives thought it was some kind of skit, watching her behavior with dismay. There were even some murmurs of exasperation about how she had always been one to do outrageous things. But the moment my sister-in-law began to rant about my husband to the tune of her humming, the atmosphere in the room turned icy.
He's shutting out his own sister. What's up with that guy? Having tea with my sister-in-law isn't such a big deal, right? Of course, the tabs on my gainfully employed sister-in-law.
She also said, "Remember when my brother gave his wife that fancy engagement ring? And sometimes he buys trendy jewelry. I bet that was all for me." Muttering to herself that I shouldn't need the accessories I used to wear when I was single, my sister-in-law meticulously rummaged through my dresser. She even said she'd cash in anything that didn't suit her or looked valuable. I had given my mother-in-law a spare key so she could play with the cat anytime. Knowing this, my sister-in-law, who had been banned from our house, took advantage of my mother-in-law's absence during the wedding to sneak in and look for valuables. Upon understanding the situation, my in-laws immediately stood up, their faces pale, and apologized to me. When we got to the venue, my sister-in-law excused herself to use the restroom. Regardless of whether my sister-in-law needed to be watched all the way to the restroom, anyone would think that if you bring someone to a venue, they would behave. My husband and I, along with my in-laws, never thought my sister-in-law would do something so drastic as to head to the venue. We assumed we'd be notified when she arrived. Who would have thought that on the very day of her own brother's wedding, she would sneak into our house to commit theft? My in-laws did apologize again, emphasizing that stopping my sister-in-law's actions was the priority, and with that, my father-in-law sprinted out of the waiting room. My mother-in-law followed him. The relatives on my husband's side seemed unable to grasp the situation. Maybe they were struggling to organize their feelings, terrified that a criminal might emerge from the family. Oblivious to the relatives' awareness, my sister-in-law, upon finding branded accessories in my dresser, tried them on, checking herself in the mirror with a satisfied smile and even checking their resale value on her phone. The relatives left in the waiting room began to grumble complaints about my sister-in-law's behavior and their growing distrust towards the in-laws who had raised her. They questioned the upbringing, suggesting that being a freeloader and single past 30 led to this behavior. Regarding this, I think it's questionable whether my husband should apologize. From the beginning, he doesn't care about the opinions of relatives, and it seems he is thinking about how to make his sister atone for her foolish actions. I could tell he was desperately trying to control his anger as he clenched his fist over and over. I felt anger and disbelief, but I was convinced that my sister-in-law and I were fundamentally different people. Talking to a person like that is just a waste of time. Even if they suffer a setback, they'll just sleep it off and completely forget about it by the next day. They don't learn from their mistakes nor have any intention of growing. They're nothing but the dregs of society, only capable of thinking about how to get through life the easy way. I swore that even if my husband or in-laws groveled and begged me for forgiveness, I would never let her in. But I doubt my husband would want that anyway. About 10 minutes after the in-laws had stormed out, the live video took a dramatic turn. As my sister-in-law was engrossed in her search, my father-in-law lunged into the room. Before she could turn around at the sound of the door swinging open, she was suddenly grabbed from behind, completely taken aback.
"What are you doing here in my son and daughter-in-law's home, which you're banned from?"
Her face was clearly shaken. Our new home wasn't equipped with security measures. It seemed like she had done her homework, knowing this. She must have found a way to snoop around without the in-laws' watchful eyes, knowing well enough that my mother-in-law had a spare key. But it looked like she hadn't thought about what would happen if she got caught. She was stumbling over her words, trying to make excuses. I was asked by my sister-in-law. Look, I even found the jewelry as proof, right? Then, trailing behind, my mother-in-law entered the room. Holding a smartphone, she loudly exclaimed that she had to report the illegal entry to the police.
Why would I ask you, someone who's banned? And why are you wearing the jewelry that you claim she asked for?
My sister-in-law's weak excuses were met with solid arguments from my mother-in-law, and as my sister-in-law looked for a chance to escape, my father-in-law pinned her down with his full weight. She was complaining that she was in pain, that she would suffocate to death, but my father-in-law firmly told her that if she had the strength to shout, she wasn't going to die. Right then, the police arrived, having been notified. My sister-in-law was taken away as a trespasser, but she kept resisting, repeating, "Just because I entered a family member's home, that's trespassing? Are the police here idiots?" My mother-in-law informed her that all the evidence was there, and that the entire family had seen it happen in real time, revealing the existence of the pet camera. When my sister-in-law saw the bedroom camera, she seemed to admit her defeat and was quietly led away by the police. I breathed a sigh of relief at that sight. I hadn't thought the in-laws would hand her over to the police, but I was grateful that they imposed a proper sanction. Yet, the fact that the criminal act of a real sister was exposed made it complicated to feel simply happy about it. Even if they hated each other and didn't get along, they were still siblings, and I believed that he must have his own thoughts about it. The relatives' room on my husband's side was in uproar. To think that a criminal had emerged from the family, some were disappointed, while others openly expressed their anger as a disgrace to the family. Amidst this, the in-laws who had handed my sister-in-law over to the police returned. Naturally, the wedding could not proceed under these circumstances and was, of course, cancelled. There were people who had traveled long distances to celebrate with us, and others who had finally managed to clear their schedules to be there. Feelings of regret and a wish for understanding intermingled within me. My in-laws quickly sensed how I felt and repeatedly bowed their heads to us, apologizing for the turn of events. The mother-in-law blamed herself for not keeping a better eye on her daughter, apologizing to us repeatedly. She also stood silently, taking in the furious remarks from the entire family, for having brought such a disgrace upon them, and kept apologizing endlessly. Having heard that the groom's side was in chaos, my parents, worried, peeked into the room. Seeing the in-laws apologizing to the groom's family, they realized something was seriously wrong and asked me for an explanation. I could say that my sister-in-law had broken into our new home to steal, but I didn't know how much they would believe. Then, noticing my parents were there, my in-laws came over and, without any explanation, apologized to my parents. When the in-laws revealed what their daughter had done, my parents' expressions grew complicated. My husband knew his sister had issues, but he had no idea she was this foolish. Along with his parents, he apologized to mine. Despite him being a victim too. But neither my parents nor I could simply say don't worry about it, and a heavy, indescribable silence hung in the air. After gathering their thoughts, my parents said they'd leave future decisions up to us, but they did agree to cancel the wedding, and for the time being, that settled things. Later on, my sister-in-law got off with just a fine because it was her first offense and she hadn't actually stolen anything. If she had been caught after rifling through the new house, theft would have been added to her charges, and she wouldn't have gotten off with just a fine. My husband bitterly said she should have been arrested for theft and spent some time in jail. I was slightly in agreement, not wanting anything to do with her going forward. Though my sister-in-law got off with a fine, she now had a criminal record, and the in-laws severely scolded her for breaking into someone's house while they were away, even if she was family. My daughter would know right from wrong well past the age of 30. My father-in-law raged to the point I thought his veins might pop, and I heard he disowned her right then and there. She had to pay for all wedding-related expenses, including those incurred from the cancellation. My sister-in-law, who had blown through all her part-time job earnings, was forced to borrow from every lender out there to cover the costs. Of course, some lenders were reputable while others were shady, skirting the edges of the law, and now she faced a future of hard work and being hounded by debt collectors. Unable to accept this series of events, my sister-in-law took to social media to vent her frustrations and seek validation, but instead, she ignited a firestorm of criticism. Her photo, real name, and criminal record were spread all over the internet, and a search would bring up those details. She later deleted her posts, but someone had saved the logs, and her rants never really disappeared from the internet. Even when she created new social media accounts, she was quickly found out, ensuring that her criminal past would follow her. She was fired from her previous part-time job because having a criminal worked there could tarnish the establishment's reputation, and she was let go from other jobs after being outed by coworkers who knew of her infamy. She's currently scraping by, working in physically demanding jobs like construction, barely making her debt payments. It's said that resuming her hobby of traveling abroad is almost impossible now.
After all that settled down, we had a small, intimate wedding with just close friends and family. It was a DIY wedding with colleagues and friends, but it was filled with love and will be a cherished memory for life. We've adopted a new cat and are spending our happy days surrounded by the kitty and kind-hearted people. Mom's been in an accident and taken to the hospital. Please, take me there. I begged my husband, tears streaming down my face. I had just received a call that my mother was in critical condition, unconscious after a traffic accident. But when I told my husband, he said, "I can't, I'm off on a trip with my colleague," and rejected my pleas. Even as I persisted, he seemed to mock me with a sneer. To me, the trip is more important. Attending someone's bedside is a waste of time. I'm definitely not going. My name is Erica, I'm 29. I married Ken, a year my senior, 2 years ago, and we both work full-time. We met at college. There were many classmates, so it was hard to talk to everyone, but we got closer after sitting next to each other at a party one day. We also discovered we both were only children raised by single mothers after losing our fathers early, which brought us closer quickly. We started going out often, and it naturally led to a relationship. As we both settled into our jobs after graduating from college, Ken proposed. We're both satisfied with our careers, so we haven't thought about children yet. We have talked about buying a house when the time comes. We're currently renting a place, and both of our homes are nearby. Since both of our fathers passed away, our mothers live alone. My mother, Sally, and my mother-in-law, Mary, get along very well. They got along because they were close in age and had raised their children on their own without remarrying. They became friends, often having coffee and traveling together. I was surprised because I never expected them to get so close, but it's great seeing them happy as they seem to have a lot of fun together. Mary treats me well too. However, Ken seems to dislike that Mary prioritizes my mother over him. He has a strong attachment to his mother. Before marriage, I knew he cherished his mother from his behavior. I was also brought up in a single-parent household, so I can understand his feelings. After getting married and starting living together, I saw his true nature. Once, when my mother sent a picture of her having lunch with Mary. The message said, "I'm having lunch with Mary now," and a picture of the two of them smiling was attached, and I remember naturally smiling as well. "Hey, Ken, it looks like your moms are having lunch right now." "Look, they sent me a photo," I said, and showed the image to Ken, who was just at home, but as soon as he saw it, he was in a good mood. It got so bad that I clicked my tongue. "Is this some kind of spite? What did you say?" I didn't know he disliked my mother then. It was true that Ken often didn't talk much in front of his mother, but I thought that was because he was nervous because he had only been married for a short time. I never imagined that he would shun my mother just because she was on good terms with his own mother. Because of that person, my mother has been turning down my invitations to dinner lately. I've been telling her that she has plans with Sally. Don't you know that your mother should be a little more reserved? I had no idea that Ken was thinking such a thing, and I was shocked to hear him say something bad about my mother. My mother-in-law apparently realized early on that Ken hated my mother.
Mary realized Ken's feelings early and scolded him during dinner when he was being sarcastic to my mother.
Ken, what's this attitude towards Sally? Stop it.
What's this? Mom always supports this person. You've always said that I'm your precious son. It's funny how you prioritize someone you've recently become friends with over your own son. Ken retorted, saying, I'm sure not, but to be honest, I couldn't help but think that his obsession with his mother-in-law was abnormal. Later, Mary apologized to me and my mother when Ken wasn't around.
I might have spoiled him too much.
I'm sorry.
Mary, there's no need to be worried. I don't either. Ken really loves you.
My mother, calm by nature, so she doesn't usually get angry at people. This time as well, she pretended to understand Ken without blaming him, but I quickly realized that she was actually hurt in her heart. Ken's attitude worsened, criticizing my mother every chance he got. He has never openly attacked his mother because his stepmother protects her. However, whenever my mother and mother-in-law seemed to be getting along well, she complained to me, and eventually started saying bad things about my mother on a daily basis. Early in our second year of marriage, we had a huge fight. After the argument, the problem was never resolved, and since then, our relationship became strained, and we spoke less. Lately, Ken's been coming home late and going out alone on weekends. When I asked, he said it's just work and needs to work more time, but something felt off. Even when he said that, I wasn't very convinced and couldn't shake the feeling of discomfort. Then, one Sunday, when we were both off, Ken was packing for something. Apparently, there is no day off work today. As I was about to ask Ken why he was packing, a call came through on my smartphone. An unknown number displayed on the screen, and with curiosity, I answered only to find out it was the police on the line. They confirmed I was Sally's daughter and then dropped the bombshell. Your mother has been in a traffic accident. My mind went blank.
My mom!
They told me she had been taken to the hospital in critical condition, unconscious. After getting the hospital's name, my shaking hands managed to end the call. Tears flooded as I struggled to think, but knew I needed to get to the hospital. Without a driver's license, I pleaded with Ken to take me.
Ken, it's awful. Mom's been in an accident. She's at the hospital. Please, we need to go now.
But Ken just turned a disgusted face towards me. Huh? I've got a trip with my colleague now, I'll miss the gathering time. Deal with it yourself, he firmly refused.
A trip? I had no idea it was today.
I realized why he was packing, but he hadn't informed me at all. He then floored me by saying the trip was for 2 weeks.
You can't be serious. Mom might.
Quiet down, the trip is more important to me.
Besides, your mom's just an unrelated old woman to me. Visiting her would be a waste of time. I'm not going.
Ken mocked me with his cruel words. Get away, I'm busy, and I got a plane to catch, he said, pushing past me, humming as he packed his clothes into his suitcase. Furious, I yelled, "You're the worst. Just do whatever you want," and stormed out to take a taxi to the hospital. Ken left for his trip as planned. He had no idea of the crisis unfolding around me during the trip. I tried calling him repeatedly to no avail, and the 2 weeks passed without any contact. 2 weeks later, Ken came home in high spirits. I greeted him with a cold stare. I have to go give my mom a souvenir now. I wonder if she's doing well. He cheerfully talked about visiting his mom with souvenirs, but I silently agreed to go with him to his mother's house. On the way, he joyfully talked about the gifts he bought. Not a word about my mom's accident. When they arrived at my in-laws' house, Ken stopped them as they were about to open the front door. Huh? Why is it locked? Arriving at a locked front door puzzled him. His mom didn't usually lock it when home. Is Mom out? He mumbled. Pushing past him, I used the spare key I had to open the door.
Why do you have the house keys?
Ken looked suspicious, but I didn't respond. Ken, entering before me, tilted his head as he couldn't find his mom. Stopping him from heading to the living room, I directed him. Not that way. Come this way, I said, leading Ken to another room. The door was open, and inside was a fresh portrait of his mother, Mary.
What? What's going on? What is this?
Holding back anger, I sighed and explained. Mary passed away while you were on your trip. The funeral is already over, I said, and Ken glared at me furiously.
Don't joke, this can't be. Why should she die? It was your mother who was supposed to be.
I was appalled by his disgraceful outburst, but told him calmly what happened after my mother's accident. My mom woke up after the accident. She's recovering from a fracture. My mother is still in the hospital, but thankfully, she was alive thanks to the medical team's efforts. Ken, still not understanding, asked. Then why is my mom? I struggled to say, the day your mom fell from the pedestrian bridge, she was on her way to our house. I suggested he had told her about the trip.
You told your mom in advance that you were going on a trip, right?
Huh? Oh, I did say that. Mary has been distrustful of you lately. She says she hasn't been able to contact you often. That's why I think she was planning on coming to see if you were really going on the trip. When I said that, Ken's eyes widened in surprise. A month ago, Mary told me that she used to hear from Ken almost every day with calls and texts, but recently, the communication had almost stopped. She'd try to call him because of urgent matters, and when he'd call back, he'd say he was busy and hang up quickly. Mary thought maybe Ken was just getting older and not clinging to his mom as much. But she couldn't shake the feeling that Ken was hiding something. That's why, driven by suspicion, she went to check if Ken really was on a company trip at the exact time I received the call about my mom's accident. It turns out that Mary had passed away carrying the souvenirs she bought with my mom on a day trip last month, probably intending to drop by under the pretext of giving us those gifts. I was so distraught that day, I couldn't think of anything but getting to the hospital as quickly as possible, and I didn't have the presence of mind to tell Mary about my mom's accident. Mary had taken the bus to the stop nearest to our apartment and must have been walking the rest from there. There's a pedestrian overpass on the way, and it seems she fell while crossing it. Witnesses say she lost her footing just before reaching the top and tumbled down. An ambulance was called immediately, but she had hit her head hard. And so, Mary was gone. After explaining all this to Ken, I glared at him fiercely.
After learning about Mary, I called you so many times.
For 2 weeks, no matter how I tried to reach him, Ken never answered his phone or returned my emails. Since there was no other relative who could arrange the funeral, I did all. I had to take on that role and managed to get through Mary's funeral while my mom was still in a critical state.
These past 2 weeks, you've been ignoring my calls and gallivanting around, right? This whole thing has shown me exactly what kind of person you are. I'm divorcing you.
When I declared that, Ken just collapsed to the floor and started bawling.
You. How can you talk about divorce right after your mom passed? And I didn't contact you because I was always with my coworkers. I didn't have the time.
He blubbered, making excuses. I was getting even angrier. Stop lying. I shouted, pulling out a piece of paper from my bag and thrusting it in front of Ken. It was a schedule for the trip I found in Ken's room.
It says here the trip was from the 12th to the 19th for 1 week. But you were gone from the 5th to the 19th.
Right before you left, you said the trip was 2 weeks.
So where were you and what were you doing for that first week? Well,
I know what you've been up to. You've been cheating, haven't you? And you spent that week with her, didn't you? I said, confident in my accusation. Ken stopped crying and started to panic. What are you talking about, cheating?
I took the rest of the week off to travel with a friend for a break.
I've been so busy at work lately. Sick of his lies, I pulled out a smartphone from my pocket. The moment Ken saw that, his face turned pale. This phone was Ken's, found in his wardrobe while he was away. There's probably another smartphone in Ken's bag. He probably had another phone in his bag to communicate with his mistress. Ken had said he couldn't contact me while he was away, but he had left his regular phone at home, so of course, he wouldn't notice any calls.
You're full of lies. You left this phone at home to spend time with your lover, didn't you?
When I placed the smartphone in front of Ken, he started shaking and banged his fist on the floor. Yeah, that's right. I've been fed up with you for a long time. I have someone else I love now, he yelled defiantly, and then, wait, how did you know where to find the phone? You didn't snoop through my room while I was gone, did you? I was appalled. I glanced at Mary's portrait, apologizing to her in my mind for this display before responding. Mary told me, I said, and Ken choked on his words. After a big fight over my mom, Ken started coming home late and going out alone on his days off, claiming to be working. When I started feeling suspicious because of his unnatural periods of unavailability, I talked to Mary about it. Mary, who also had her doubts about Ken, gave me some advice.
He's always had a habit of hiding things that don't suit him. Like a bad test score or a glass that your father cherished that he broke by accident. He used to keep these things carefully in the back of his wardrobe. If there were a bunch of towels in the back of the drawer, I would probably hide them there.
After my mother-in-law passed away, I remembered those words and searched in Ken's room, and as expected, I found a smartphone.
No way, Mom did that to you.
Ken seemed genuinely shocked to find out his beloved mother, Mary, had doubted him. Despite his dismay, I felt nothing for him and sternly told him, because of what happened, I am asking you the divorce, and I'm willing to talk to a lawyer and take this to court if necessary. Ken groaned but, realizing he had no escape, he reluctantly agreed. After we properly divided our assets, the divorce went through without a hitch. But the following month, just as I was settling into my new life, Ken called. Reluctantly, I answered, and he blurted out, Erica. Please, I need your help.
What now, Ken? What happened?
He was in trouble because his company found out about Mary's funeral. Mary had been listed as a dependent for Ken's benefits, so he was supposed to return her insurance card to the company after her passing. The company only learned of her death through this process, and it became apparent that her funeral happened while Ken was supposed to be on a company trip. His colleagues viewed him coldly, considering him an ungrateful son for not attending his own mother's funeral. Ken tried to shift the blame by saying I didn't inform him about the funeral. However, it probably wasn't a good idea to rush and tell so many people. He told different stories to different people at his workplace. It led to inconsistencies that revealed his lies. Already seen as irresponsible, his repeated lies made people doubt his character even more, leading to his isolation and eventual resignation from his job. Now without an income, Ken was living off Mary's inheritance at her house.
The neighbors found out I didn't attend the funeral, and it's awkward just walking outside. I thought about selling the house, but it's old and won't sell.
Ken is recognized by the neighbors as a bastard son, and seems to be uncomfortable even walking outside. So he made arrangements to sell my in-laws' house and move in as soon as possible, but since it's an old house, there doesn't seem to be any sign of it selling.
Erica, let's start over. Remarry me, and let's live together again.
I was disgusted when I heard those words. I realized he only reached out because he was in a tough spot, and I replied firmly.
Don't be ridiculous. I want nothing to do with you, especially not a remarriage. I beg you, if you keep this up, I don't know you anymore. You should just live with the person you're cheating on with instead of me.
When Ken refused with all his might, he began to mumble something. No, actually. I've already broken up with my partner. He continued to beg, revealing that his affair partner had left him after finding out about Mary's funeral and that he had been married all along. Ken apparently hid the fact that he was married, and was dumped by the woman he was furious with, so he is now alone. I told him coldly, you got what you deserved. I have no intention of being with someone like you. As I was about to hang up, Ken frantically said, wait. If you won't agree to remarry, I'll come to your house and talk directly. You're at your parents' place, right? I cut him off with a lie, no, I'm not there, to which he quickly asked.
Then where are you? I'm not telling you. And by the way, I've changed jobs, so even if you wait outside my old workplace, it won't do you any good. I've told everyone to call the police if they see you around.
I decided to sell my parents' house in order to distance myself from Ken as much as possible due to this incident. However, since my parents' house is quite old, it is unlikely that they will find a buyer. So, with my mother's consent, I turned it into a vacant lot and sold it. Speaking of my mother, she was finally discharged from the hospital recently, but she lost her mother-in-law, who was a dear friend, and she is feeling quite haggard. So I moved to another place where I could live quietly with my mother. As a result, I quit the company I was working for and changed jobs.
Then at least tell me where you are. I was also visiting your mother, who has been taking care of me until now.
Ken was desperately trying to find out where I was, but his words made me angry and my voice was surprisingly cold.
Taking care of you? You've been complaining about my mother a lot, but don't say such convenient words now. Besides, my mother also says she doesn't want to see you again. Hey, wait a minute, Erica!
Ken was still yelling something, but I ended the call without mercy. After hanging up, I blocked his number and later changed it. I later learned that Ken couldn't manage his savings, and he was currently in a difficult situation. Ken is struggling with debt and unable to find steady work, resorting to day jobs and part-time work. As for my mother and me, we started anew elsewhere and were free from the stress related to Ken. She had been unable to visit Mary's grave due to her hospital stay and our move. It seems like she still hasn't come to terms with the fact that Mary has passed away, and she often cries looking at photos and videos of her dear friend. I want to go see Mary soon, she says sadly, so I promised we would visit the grave soon, carefully planning to avoid running into Ken. I'm focused on supporting my mother and making the most of our lives in this new place.
You collapsed? Like I care. Answer me immediately when I call you, you waste of space.
My husband yelled at me without a hint of worry as I was being urgently transported to the hospital with our child in a dangerous state in my womb.
Here we're starving, waiting for your awful dinner, and you're comfortably napping in the hospital. That's enough. I'm going to eat out with my parents, you make your own way home.
I could feel my husband's fury through the phone, accusing me as if I had done something terribly wrong, making me shrink back in fear, thinking only of the child in my womb that I must protect. I tried to speak, but a sound from the phone stopped me from continuing. I am a housewife, currently pregnant. Previously, I worked as a cosmetics salesperson. I loved my job and took pride in it. I had many loyal customers who specifically asked for me, and I made decent sales, often being recognized within the company. The certificates and mementos I received are still carefully stored in my room, and I look back at them occasionally for a boost of morale. I met my husband at a mixer organized by a colleague, and we dated before getting married. Right after we married, I found out I was pregnant, and I wanted to use the maternity leave system to keep working. However, because there was a risk of miscarriage if I continued working, I had no choice but to quit. I honestly had reservations about leaving my job. But I resolved to do my best to support our family from now on. While I rejoice at our baby's growth with each hospital checkup, there are many days when my body doesn't move as I want it to due to the pregnancy, which frustrates me. It can't be helped, that's how pregnancy is. Don't rush, say friends who have been through childbirth, trying to encourage me. But my husband doesn't seem to think so. I must appear to him like a lazy, useless wife.
Hey, where's my lunch? Just sandwiches?
I'm sorry, I couldn't stand the smell of side dishes. I could only manage to make sandwiches. If it's not enough, could you please buy some side dishes at the grocery store?
What's the point of being a stay-at-home wife?
Yeah. I'm just not feeling well. Sorry.
You know, you always use your pregnancy as an excuse, but being pregnant isn't a sickness, so stop making excuses. Fine. I'll eat lunch out. You deal with the sandwiches.
At first, my husband was happy that we were having a child, but gradually his attitude towards me has gotten worse. He no longer comes with me to the hospital, blames me for not keeping up with the housework, and does nothing but berate me every day. He wasn't like this oppressive person when we met. But maybe he's tired, too. He's become a mentor to a new employee at work, apparently. He's been so busy, so probably his lack of patience has made him rough towards me. By the time this child is born, hopefully, his busy period will have settled down, and we can live happily as a family. It's going to be okay, it's going to be okay. I rub my slowly growing belly and reassure myself. Struggling with a body and a life that won't cooperate. I encourage myself and do the best I can, but my relationship with my husband doesn't improve. On top of that, my parents-in-law have started dropping by unannounced lately, and it's become a real source of stress.
How can our son live in such a dirty place? What will you do when the baby arrives? How are you going to manage the hygiene?
Right, honey? Yes, it is worrisome indeed. I'm sorry.
After all the trouble we went to come here because we're worried, don't you have any hospitality?
Alcohol.
And prepare some carpaccios or something nice to eat.
Come on, hurry up. I haven't prepared anything at home. If you had called, I would have prepared something.
Enough with the excuses. Just go buy something and get it ready. Hey, why did you marry such a girl?
I really wonder why I messed up choosing a wife. Hurry up and go. And with that, I felt the chilly air around me as I left for the store, heavily pregnant. This wasn't the first or second time. Every time the parents-in-law come, they criticize everything from cleaning to cooking, and my husband joins in. Even when I do everything I can, he never defends me, just adds more criticism. As I was struggling with my physical discomfort, I managed to pick up the items requested by the parents-in-law at the grocery store, and just as I tried to lift the bags, my vision went white and I lost consciousness. When I woke up, I was met with a stark white ceiling. There was an 4 needle in my arm. As my consciousness slowly cleared, a nurse noticed and called a doctor, who explained I had collapsed from overwork and had been brought to the hospital by ambulance. I was relieved to hear the baby was safe. However, I was strongly advised to stay in the hospital for a few days to rest. They said to contact my family later, and when I checked my phone, there were several missed calls from my husband. He must have been worried about me not returning from the store. After the 4 was finished, I moved to a space where I could make phone calls and dialed my husband. But the voice that answered after a few rings was full of anger.
Who do you think you are, ignoring my calls, you good for nothing?
I flinched at those words. I'm sorry, I collapsed at the grocery store and was brought to the hospital by ambulance. They put me on N4 and said I should be observed for a few days.
You collapsed? Like I care. Answer me immediately when I call you, you slowpoke. Stop it with the harsh words. It's bad for the baby's prenatal education.
I was met with my husband's verbal abuse over the phone. He seemed quite upset that I hadn't answered despite his multiple calls. Not wanting our baby to hear such awful words, I instinctively cut him off.
Here we're starving, waiting for your awful dinner, and you're comfortably napping in the hospital. That's enough. I'm going to eat out with my parents, you make your own way home.
Even knowing I had been taken to the hospital, my husband yelled at me without any concern or care. I could feel my husband's fury through the phone. I cringed in fear, not wanting my unborn child to hear such filthy words, and instinctively covered my ears. Then, before I could speak, the call abruptly ended. Not that I was expecting anything, but I felt disheartened by my husband's reaction and returned to my hospital room. As soon as I entered the room, tears started to fall, one after another. Once they started, they flowed uncontrollably. As I covered my face, a calm and kind voice asked, "Are you okay?" I looked up to see the face of a woman. A face I could never forget. The woman offering me a towel was a customer I had become close to when I worked as a salesperson. Claire.
Yes, it's me, Chloe. I'm so happy you remember me. To meet again like this, it must be fate. I could never forget you, Claire.
The woman, lively and laughing, was unmistakably the Claire I knew. Back then, Claire was a woman who had just gone through a divorce, with a child, lost confidence in herself, and hadn't worn makeup in years. I approached her as she aimlessly looked around the cosmetics counter and asked, "Would you like to try some makeup?" And then I applied makeup for her. Seeing her face beautifully made up for the first time in a long while, Claire seemed to relax and even shed a tear. I remember feeling a tightness in my chest as well. Gradually, Claire regained her confidence and became a regular customer. Though we had a customer-salesperson relationship, we had built a good rapport, but 3 years before I resigned, Claire suddenly stopped showing up. "I came back hoping to see you, Chloe, but when I went to your old workplace, they told me you had resigned, and I was so shocked." "You came all the way to see me? Sorry for bothering you. But you mentioned coming back, were you overseas?" "That's right. I actually run a business, and work abroad suddenly got busy. I haven't had American food in years, and I've missed it. So when work finally calmed down, I came back, and after visiting your former workplace, I ended up with appendicitis. And that's how I ended up in this hospital." "What? Are you okay?" "It's just the early stages, so I can take medication to reduce it. Plus, if I were abroad, the treatment would cost many times more, so I'm glad it happened after I came back," Claire said with a laugh, her face as radiant with that familiar dazzling smile. I couldn't help but smile back as if taken back to those years ago. My spirits, which had been quite low, were now lifted, and we found ourselves happily reminiscing about the old times. "So, Chloe, you don't have to say if you don't want to, but why were you crying earlier?" Claire asked with her kind smile. Although our relationship was originally that of a salesperson and a valued customer, I truly trusted Claire. Thinking that I could tell her, I shared that things weren't going well with my husband and in-laws. I don't feel confident about giving birth to this child in that house and raising them safely. I'm afraid they'll treat the baby just like they treat me. But now, I've quit my job and don't have any prospects for living alone, let alone with two. Well, I have an apartment available that I could lend to you. As part of my work, I'm managing apartments I built on land I inherited from my parents." "What?" I was taken aback by Claire's unexpected offer. "It's in one bedroom with a separate bathroom and toilet, soundproof walls, and it's comfortable. Plus, it's close to supermarkets, grocery stores, and a police station, so it's safe and secure. Right now, there's no deposit required for rent. You can pay the rent later on as you settle in. It's an incredibly great deal. So, what do you think?" Claire rattled on with such fervor that I couldn't help but let out a chuckle. "Are you sure you can offer it at such a bargain?" "Of course. I know you, Chloe, you have a great character, and I know you'll keep the place clean, so you're more than welcome. I want to help my favorite Chloe. I'll take you up on that offer, thank you." A few days later, after getting the all clear from the doctor, I was discharged from the hospital without any problems. Claire, who had arranged the apartment over a single phone call while I was hospitalized, had made it ready for me to move in right away, and I decided to shamelessly take full advantage of her generosity. After being discharged, I didn't return home but moved straight into the apartment. Claire's apartment was a beautiful and comfortable place. I felt so grateful and kept wondering if someone like me really should be renting it and if it was okay to pay the rent later, but Claire just laughed it off, saying, "It's totally fine." I would sneak back to my former house during my husband's work hours to take out what I needed. There was hardly anything in the house that was mine after we got married, it felt empty. Claire even went as far as introducing me to a lawyer she had received help from. I was thankful for everything. My mind was completely made up about the divorce. When I told the lawyer, he strongly said, "Let's work hard on this," and it was reassuring. And the baby in my womb was growing healthily without any problems. Today's checkup was also problem-free, and I settled my hospital bill with a sense of relief and stepped outside. Then, "I've found you." My husband was lying in wait in front of the hospital. In a panic, I tried to flee, but with my pregnant body, there was no way I could run. Stop it. My husband grabbed my arm firmly.
I finally found you. What's this about hiring a lawyer? Where are you living right now?
Nowhere specific, just a safe place. As the lawyer said, I want all further interactions to be through them, not directly.
You coward. Hiring a lawyer, how dare you get so high and mighty? And what's this about a divorce? What have I done to deserve this?
That too, please discuss with the lawyer. I'm expecting compensation for the damage to my dignity and child support. Please be so kind.
You wretch. We're going home.
What? What are you talking about?
I have no intention of paying child support or damage, just so you know. If you come back, all of this will be resolved, that's what my parents said. Come on, let's go. Wait, stop.
I almost stumbled as he forcefully pulled my arm. But between the difference in strength and my heavily pregnant state, I stood no chance. I was helplessly dragged by my husband towards the car. However, at that moment, a young woman intervened, saying, "What are you doing?" She stood protectively in front of me. And as my husband's grip loosened, I took the chance to pull my arm away. His face filled with astonishment as he looked at the woman. Audrey. I was surprised to see my husband and the woman knew each other, but they continued their exchange without regard for me. "What are you doing, Oliver?" "I'm just here to pick up my wife. She doesn't want to go with you." The woman named Audrey confronted my husband. He was completely taken aback. "No, that's not it. My wife, she's pregnant and a little, no, quite moody. Come on, let's go home." "No, I'm not going back. I've already got a lawyer for the divorce." "Is that true? So, Oliver, you're trying to forcibly take your wife back home?" "No. I'm not." "Yes, that's what's happening."
Hey! What are you talking about?
My firm statement made my husband's eyes widen with anger, but the woman's expression grew even sterner. "You can't force even your wife to do anything. Should I call the police?" "I'm going home, today." My husband seemed intimidated by the word police and glared at me as he left. Suddenly feeling tense, my body relaxed, and my legs began to wobble. The woman quickly supported me. "Are you okay?" Sorry. I just felt so relieved that I went weak. "I'm calling a taxi right now." She efficiently called a taxi and helped me into it. "I'm worried, so I'll make sure you get home safely. I can't let you go to all that trouble." "It's fine. I'm already involved, and if it's not a bother." Her smile was comforting, and it felt strangely familiar. "It's no bother at all." "Then that's settled. And your address is?" When I gave her my address, her eyes widened in surprise. "I can't believe it. You live just below me, Chloe." Audrey, who had escorted me home and took care of me, laughed cheerfully. It was a complete coincidence, but Audrey lived just one floor above of my apartment. And what's more, she was a new employee at my husband Oliver's workplace, and he used to be her mentor. Used to be because his behavior was so appalling that she had complained to her superior and he was replaced. Oliver was known for being harsh with female employees, unsympathetic to issues like menstruation or cold sensitivity, and insensitive about relationships and marriage. It might sound bad to say this in front of his wife, but even when I was in severe menstrual pain and couldn't move well despite medication, he'd say, "Are you kidding me? That's just an excuse. Stop dawdling, ugly." Other than that, apparently, he had a habit of making snide remarks to Audrey, who would leave work on time after finishing all her tasks. "I understand. I've been treated like that since I got pregnant. So, it wasn't just at home. I should have known he was like that outside too, sorry about it." "You're not at fault at all, Chloe. The one to blame is Oliver." Audrey's firm declaration somehow brought tears to my eyes. A week later. Though we had only met recently, Audrey and I had become close enough to casually share dinners like friends. She told me that my husband had been ordered to transfer to a subsidiary company. Claire is a successful businesswoman who manages several buildings and apartments, and Oliver had boasted at work that he was handling Claire's account. However, Claire had suddenly demanded a change of contact, threatening to sign with another company if it wasn't done, leaving the superiors puzzled. Then, Audrey submitted a statement, recordings of the verbal abuse, and testimonies from female victims accumulated against my husband. Among the projects Claire was promoting was the construction of a women-only apartment building. It was deemed inappropriate for someone who disparaged women and stalked his wife to be in charge. Why did Audrey take such action? I was shocked when I heard it, but it turns out that Audrey was actually Claire's daughter. She had joined the same company as Oliver to gain social experience. Indeed, Audrey was so capable that she easily acquired a more advanced qualification than my husband had. Despite his teasing every time she left on time, asking, "Got a date?" she was diligently studying in any spare time she had. Audrey was determined to solve the workplace issues on her own without relying on her mother's help, but once she found out I was her mother's savior, she couldn't stand by and do nothing. When Claire found out that the problematic supervisor at Audrey's workplace was my husband, she said, "Don't hold back, lay out all the evidence." As a result, the choice between a husband with an abnormal amount of complaints from female employees and who lost a major client and a capable new employee who is also the daughter of a client and has advanced qualifications was clear, and the company readily transferred my husband. Since being moved to the subsidiary, Oliver's income decreased, and his workload increased considerably as he was the only one there with a qualification. Chloe, no matter how much Oliver tries to appeal to your sympathy, don't falter in your stance on the divorce. The words of a seasoned businesswoman and divorcee carried a different weight. I nodded firmly in agreement. After that, indeed, Oliver sent emails and messages through the lawyer, crying about how hard work was, how much he missed me, and begging me to come back because he admitted he was at fault. But I didn't waver in my decision to divorce, and with the strong backing of Claire, Oliver reluctantly agreed to the divorce. The damage and child support were to be paid in installments. I had dealt with my husband's issue, but another trouble was my parents-in-law. Especially my father-in-law, who was thrilled about the baby being a boy. I knew something was bound to happen. The tension-filled life continued. And then, my parents-in-law finally made their move. One day, as I was leaving the apartment to go shopping, the one who grabbed my arm was my father-in-law.
How did you find me here? Please, let go. I followed that complaint woman thinking to get back at her, and then saw you coming out of the same apartment.
Complaint woman must be referring to Audrey. Which was an awful way to refer to her because of some misunderstanding.
If you hadn't started with this divorce nonsense. Damn it. For now, just hand over the grandson once he's born. He's the heir to our family.
My father-in-law, who was bigger and stronger than my husband, had a fierce grip. I swung my bag with all my might with my free hand, but he wasn't fazed at all. As I panicked about what to do, a sharp voice called out, "Let go of Chloe." With the voice came a chop to my father-in-law's arm, and his grip loosened. Hi-ya! In an instant, my father-in-law was sent flying through the air. It was a magnificent one-armed shoulder throw that I had never even seen on TV. I later learned that, during Claire's divorce, Audrey had taken up judo to protect Mom. She's apparently certified with the highest class and has won multiple national competitions. And still gets invitations from various places.
You all are the worst,
Audrey exclaimed to my stunned father-in-law, who was not understanding what had just happened. What kind of people overlook their sons' misdeeds? What do you think of Chloe and the life in her womb? Chloe is going to build a happy home with her child. And you're trying to interfere with that. Are you monsters? The least you can do is not get in the way of her new start. As Audrey finished saying in disgust, I could hear sirens in the distance. She must have called for help before coming to my aid. Unbeknownst to me, my mother-in-law had been waiting in the car as the driver. Both parents-in-law were taken away by the police. My mother-in-law, perhaps contemplating her actions, kept her face down the entire time. Later, my father-in-law was arrested, and my mother-in-law filed for divorce. She wanted to re-examine her life, which had always been directed by others, and decided to return to the countryside. Oliver pleaded with his mother, saying he wanted to go with her and that he didn't want to work overtime anymore, but she resolutely shook off his hand. My mother-in-law asked the lawyer to tell me she was sorry and left an envelope with some money before leaving. That's what Claire told me. People sometimes don't know what to do after they divorce their husband. Is that how it is? Yes, that's what the experienced say. Claire said, handing me an envelope filled with money. I wonder why she entrusted the lawyer with this money. It must be an apology for what has happened so far, Chloe, and to help with your son's future. Don't hesitate to take it and use it. I had never expected support from my mother-in-law, who had been complicit in many ways. I can't forgive everything that happened, but I hope she takes her time to regain her own life. After the divorce was finalized, I safely gave birth to a boy. And then, my mother-in-law seems to be living in the countryside. I don't know the details because she's on her own, but she probably refused to live with Oliver. After my father-in-law was released, he found the house in his wife's name had been demolished and he frantically moved in with Oliver. There was a fierce argument about supporting and not supporting, which led to the police being called. As a result, Oliver's reputation at his company worsened, and he resigned voluntarily. Where he went after that is unknown, but child support is still paid without fail. Probably Claire and the lawyer know of Oliver's whereabouts. As for Audrey, her hard work was recognized, and she seems to have become a project leader at work. She's especially admired by her young colleagues and enjoys her work. Claire's projects, women-only properties and properties for foreigners wanting to settle in the US, are progressing well. As for me, once my son is old enough to be left with someone else, I plan to return to work. A high-end cosmetics store is set to open in one of the buildings Claire manages, and I've been invited to be part of the opening staff. Claire, I don't know how to return this favor, thank you for everything. Even after all problems were resolved, Claire continued to take care of me and doted on my son as if he were her own grandchild. Audrey also visits often when she has the time. Compared to the favor you did for me, Chloe, I haven't done anything significant. Thanks to you doing my makeup, I gained confidence in myself. I'm just repaying a favor to my benefactor. I still owe you more than enough. Oh, I can't wait for Chloe to return to work. Your magic touch makes everyone happy. Do my makeup again, okay? Of course, I will. I nodded, my eyes brimming with tears, as Claire laughed brightly. For my son and all my benefactors, I resolved to become as strong as them and protect my son. I'm giving you, a defective person who can't even have kids, a chance to gain parenting experience. Be grateful. My husband said astonishingly, walking out of the house cheerfully with Ashley. I sat there, disappointed in my husband who prioritized Ashley over me, his wife, listening to the sound of Ashley's kids wreaking havoc inside our home. Despite my husband's persistent preference for his ex-girlfriend, I had hoped and endured, believing he would eventually understand. But I had reached my limit and decided to contact someone. My name is Katie, 31 years old. I met my husband, Jack, through a matchmaking party and we've been married for 3 years. Working from home, I rarely had opportunities to meet new people and felt the pressure as my friends got married one after the other. Being an only child, I was also eager to give my parents grandchildren. That's why I chose to go to the party, where I met Jack, who shared my values. We married shortly after dating as he, too, felt the pressure of being unmarried. We had no problems staying together, so we got married soon after we met. I thought it was a good decision at the time. However, our inability to conceive soon became a source of distress. 2 years passed without a child, and Jack grew discontent, blaming me for our infertility. Yet, medical tests showed no issues on my part. Despite his harsh words, The test results gave me hope that together, we could overcome this. But Jack refused to visit the clinic with me, blaming me alone.
Hey, don't you want a baby? Let's get checked together.
I suggested even undergoing fertility treatments in my eagerness for a child. However, when it comes to children, I absolutely need his cooperation. I kept pleading with Jack to take this seriously.
Why should I go to a clinic? It's your fault, you infertile woman.
But my husband just made fun of me and refused to cooperate. And blaming me for our childlessness. Until now, even if my husband complained, I had hoped he was just anxious about not having kids. But his lack of understanding shocked me. Nonetheless, I continued to try to persuade him. I believed that someday he would understand one day. Then, Jack was transferred and we moved in April. He wanted to live in his hometown, and since I could work from anywhere, I didn't object. Our new rented house, larger than the last. It allowed me a dedicated workspace, which delighted me. I thought I could concentrate on work. Close to his parents yet maintaining a healthy distance, our relationship with them was good. The place seemed more comfortable than I expected, so the new environment seemed promising. After organizing our belongings, we went shopping to get accustomed to our new life. As Jack showed me around, we walked around the store. I noticed some kids, likely siblings. They were running around the store so fast that I thought it was dangerous, but I was able to finish my shopping without incident. Exiting the store, I heard a woman calling Jack's name. She was pushing a stroller, a stranger to me, but Jack greeted her with a joyous smile.
Ashley? It's been so long.
Since high school. How've you been? I was surprised because my husband was so friendly. I thought they were friends, but not recalling her from his friends at our wedding. Curious, I asked Jack about her. You two seem close. A friend?
Oh. She's my ex-girlfriend from high school,
he said cheerfully, leaving me speechless. I couldn't have expected him to happily tell me, his wife, that she was his ex-girlfriend, and I was taken aback. Unaware of my shock, Ashley spoke to me. You're Jack's wife? I was his junior in high school and his ex-girlfriend. Surprised, I didn't know how to respond. Listening to their conversation, I learned Ashley had married right after high school, had kids. She is now a single mother, helped by her parents. It's really busy with 5 kids, she said, emphasizing her struggles. The children running around in the store were hers, I realized in astonishment. I thought she seemed like an insane person, but when she said that she had 5 children, I was surprised and looked at her. Ashley, with her heavy makeup and flashy, revealing clothes, didn't look like a mom at all, especially not one who just had kids. She still maintained her figure, which I had to admit was impressive. Hearing this, I realized she could mention her past with Jack so casually because it was just a memory for her. Then Jack said something outrageous. That's tough. Hey, we don't have kids and you're always welcome to come over and relax at our house.
Really? That'd be a huge help with all my kids.
Unbelievably, Jack suggested our home as a makeshift daycare. And Ashley seemed all too eager to take advantage, so I immediately objected.
What? Look, I work from home, so that's not gonna work.
I was irritated by Jack's casual attitude and Ashley's presumptuousness. Despite my cold response, Jack chastised me. Ashley's got it tough, you know? Looking after her kids would be a good deed. Plus, it's like practice for us, ain't it? Ashley had been left by her husband, struggling alone. For some reason, Jack was all too eager to help her. It made me angry, considering his lack of support in our fertility journey.
That's why I don't have time for this. If you want to look after kids, do it yourself.
Why should I, a complete stranger to her, sacrifice my time? Especially for someone as imposing as Ashley.
You don't have to be so harsh. That's mean.
Contrary to my natural objection, Ashley played the victim, tears in her eyes. What's with you, Katie?
Ashley's doing her best alone, and you won't even help?
Seeing Ashley like that, Jack scolded me, comforting her. Seeing this, I feared our new life, which I had been looking forward to, would become a nightmare. And true to form, Ashley started bringing her kids over without any hesitation. At first, I refused to let them in, turning them away at the doorstep. But the kids caused trouble outside, disturbing the neighbors. Apparently, Ashley hardly disciplined them, leaving them to run wild like animals. I managed to keep them out, knowing they'd wreak havoc inside. Yet, Jack, having heard from Ashley, blamed me for not letting them in, leading to a fight.
I don't want strangers in the house. They'll just make a mess.
Don't be so narrow-minded.
That's just mean. Plus, wouldn't it be good for you to get some practice with kids?
Ashley's kids ranged from a third grader to a newborn. Jack argued that taking care of them would be good practice for when we have our own, despite my protests. No matter how much I said I didn't like it, my husband didn't understand, no matter how much I explained to him, and in the end, he gave the duplicate key to her. When I discovered her entering our home uninvited, I trembled with fear. As he even gave Ashley the key, we had a huge fight. Despite my efforts, the kids turned the rest of the house upside down while I protected my workspace. They ignored my warnings, running around and knocking things over. Ashley, ever imposing, demanded soft drinks and snacks, and even dinner when Jack came home. It was impossible to prepare meals for so many on short notice. Of course, I refused, but Jack sided with her, forcing me to make arrangements. Ashley didn't contribute to the additional food costs. When I mentioned it to Jack, he just said to cover it ourselves.
Ashley's struggling with 5 kids.
Don't be stingy.
We don't have kids, so it shouldn't be a problem for us.
His lack of concern for our finances frustrated me.
This is our money. If you're so concerned, Jack, why don't you cover everything?
When I suggested Jack pay all Ashley-related expenses, he argued that as his wife, I should help. This led to constant fighting because of Ashley. Moreover, I heard that Ashley's parents were working to support their grandchildren, so she wasn't as desperate as she let on. She showed little interest in her kids, barely responding when they talked to her. She focused on herself and neglected them. It was probably why her kids were not disciplined and so unruly. The eldest, not even 10, seemed to take care of the younger ones. It was annoying though, I felt sorry for the kids. But I had my own life to lead. I taught them basic rules for being in our house, which calmed things down a bit. But why should I, a total stranger, have to do all this? My work was disrupted, and the extra housework piled up, leaving me furious at Jack and Ashley. It got worse when school let out for summer and the kids started coming over every day. Ashley was here so often, I wondered if she even worked. They stay at home all day more than ever before, expecting lunch, too. I was at my wit's end. Jack was no help, and Ashley just played the victim. It seemed impossible to resolve anything through discussion. I didn't know what to do, so I started to worry. Then one day, Ashley came over again, expecting me to take care of her kids.
I'm going on a trip for 3 days from today. Please look after my kids,
she announced cheerily, carrying her suitcase.
What? For 3 days? That's a problem.
I was taken aback by her sudden request. Despite her parents being around, why was she leaving her kids with me?
Well, the kids prefer being here. And while you're at it, please help them with their summer homework and make some memories,
she said, completely disregarding my feelings. I was livid and opposed her, but she wouldn't listen. Then, to my surprise, Jack showed up at the door, suitcase in hand, smiling beside Ashley. I was confused, as Jack hadn't mentioned any travel plans. Then he dropped a bombshell.
Well, I'm off on a trip with Ashley. The kids are your responsibility. What? What do you mean?
I was dumbfounded by his announcement. When I confronted him, he arrogantly retorted.
I'm giving you, a defective who can't even have kids, a chance to gain parenting experience.
Be grateful. He seemed to think he was doing this for my benefit. He was basking in his self-righteousness. Then they left, suitcases in hand, leaving me in shock. I quickly contacted Jack, insisting it was impossible and asking why he was traveling. He explained it was to give Ashley, abandoned by her husband. As she was raising 5 kids alone, he suggested a break at a luxury resort. I had never been taken on a trip by Jack, nor had I been pampered like that. I was speechless with rage. But the sound of the kids wreaking havoc snapped me back to reality. I couldn't survive 3 days like this. My trust and hope in Jack were completely gone. I had to seek help, so I reached out to someone. 3 days later, around noon, Jack and Ashley returned, looking happy. But their smiles faded upon seeing me.
Welcome back. Did you enjoy your trip?
I asked cheerfully, contrary to their expectation of a worn-out me.
Yeah, it was great. But where are the kids?
They're quiet. Sleeping? Ashley was flustered, surprised by the absence of the usually noisy kids.
No, they're awake. Hey! Your mom's back from her trip.
When I called them, they came to the entrance, calm and quiet, a stark contrast to their previous wild behavior. Ashley was shocked at their transformation into well-behaved children. She was distraught and couldn't believe the change in the children's behavior. Because they used polite language and learned manners.
Katie, thank you so much for everything. Come on, Mom, make sure to thank her properly.
After being told by her kids to apologize for their past behavior, Ashley became almost hysterical.
Why have my kids changed like this? What did you do?
She was upset by the change in her children, who had always been obedient and never defied her before. As she ranted, Jack and Ashley noticed someone emerging from behind the kids and turned pale.
Why are my brother and sister here?
Jack, never expecting family involvement, asked tremblingly, like a child caught misbehaving.
What are you doing not protecting your family? I heard about the situation from Katie and came to help. You're her husband and not helping your wife?
My brother-in-law and sister-in-law looked at Jack with a mix of disdain and anger. When Jack and Ashley left for their trip, I realized I couldn't handle all 5 kids alone, so I asked my sister-in-law for help. Knowing she was a childcare worker, I explained the situation and begged for her assistance. She, angered by Jack's actions, immediately came over to support me. Moreover, she informed my brother-in-law, who also came to help as he was off work. He's a middle school teacher and former athlete, so he's physically strong. It made the kids ecstatic to play with him. Both being experienced with children due to their jobs, they redisciplined the kids in 3 days, turning them into polite and well-mannered children. After hearing my story, they assured me they were on my side and ready to help, comforting me with smiles. I wished I had asked them for help sooner.
Why are you relying on my brother and sister? What are you doing? What have you done to my kids?
Both Jack and Ashley tried to blame me, but they were silenced by disapproving stares from my brother-in-law, sister-in-law, and even the kids. Jack, having always felt inferior to his more accomplished elder siblings, was visibly uneasy. My sister-in-law scolded him.
You're married and yet you're prioritizing an ex-girlfriend? And she cheated on you in high school, remember?
She knew Ashley from high school and disliked her for being a gossip and flattering boys. I was shocked to learn that Ashley's infidelity was the reason for their breakup. I'd thought they parted amicably or just drifted apart. I never expected that my husband would be on the side of the person who cheated on him.
As a man, I can't believe what you're doing.
My brother-in-law added, further shrinking Jack. Frustrated, I handed Jack the contact number of a lawyer. I can't do this anymore. Let's get divorced right away.
Divorce? Why?
Jack was shocked, not expecting this, and his reaction only fueled my anger.
Did you think I didn't know anything?
I showed him the evidence of his affair with Ashley. While they were on the trip, I searched Jack's belongings and computer. I'd suspected infidelity due to his favoritism towards Ashley, but never had proof until now. Therefore, when I took this opportunity to thoroughly investigate my husband's luggage and computer, I was able to easily find evidence of his affair. I found clear evidence, including their trip reservation details left on his computer. I even went to the resort they were staying at and photographed them in the act. I wore a hat and mask, and Jack, oblivious to my presence, was enjoying himself with Ashley, mocking me. It was clear he saw me as nothing more than a convenient housekeeper and source of money. I was filled with anger and sadness, wondering what all the time spent with Jack meant. As I laid out the evidence of his cheating, Jack gradually lost his ability to argue back. Realizing the proof of his infidelity and the cold stares from everyone but Ashley, he resignedly agreed a divorce. Ashley, sensing she was at a disadvantage, perhaps wanting to escape a space with her disliked sister-in-law, urged Jack to leave.
"Let's get out of this family,"
Jack replied, trying to sound tough. "Yeah, I don't need Katie anyway." As they attempted to flee with the kids, but they were unable to do so. Ashley's parents appeared at the door.
"What? Why are you two here?"
Ashley was surprised, and the kids joyfully ran to their grandparents. Ashley's parents looked tired but angry at her. I had found their contact information while searching for evidence of the affair and had informed them of Ashley's actions and the trip with my husband. They apologized and agreed to help me.
"You cheated again. You were divorced because of you, haven't you learned?"
Ashley's mother slapped her in the face. Ashley's father, amidst the chaos, was guiding the children outside, shielding them from the situation.
"What? An affair and divorce?"
Jack looked at Ashley, confused. Although Ashley had claimed her divorce was her husband's fault, the truth was different. Ashley had been unfaithful, and it turned out she had another child, making a total of 6. The oldest was from her marriage, so her ex-husband took custody, but the fathers of the other children were unknown. After the divorce, Ashley, with nowhere else to go, moved back in with her parents. Despite starting work to support their grandchildren, Ashley hadn't changed her ways. She continued to neglect her job, leading a frivolous life, resulting in more children. Occasionally, her simultaneous relationships with multiple partners led to complicated situations, burdening her parents. Frustrated, her parents were already quite stern with her, and Ashley, tired of their scolding, ended up imposing on me at my house.
"What? You've been seeing other people besides me? And the youngest isn't mine."
Jack, apparently unaware of this, was shocked. The interaction between Jack and Ashley on his computer had started with a message from Ashley a year ago, seeking help. She was abandoned by her husband and is living a difficult life. She portrayed herself as a victim, abandoned by her husband and struggling. I never understood what Jack saw in Ashley, but her acting skills were certainly persuasive. Deceived by her act and the allure of an old flame, Jack eagerly replied and even made arrangements to meet her. This had happened about 8 months ago, when Jack told me he was going away on a business trip. Later, when Ashley claimed her youngest child was Jack's, he became even more supportive of her. Jack's transfer appeared to be influenced by Ashley's proximity and his desire to be near his supposed child. With no children between us, Jack seemed willing to defend Ashley to be with his own child. However, the timing of Jack's encounter with Ashley and the child's birth did not match. The period between their meeting and the pregnancy was too short for the child to be Jack's. If Jack had taken pregnancy and child-rearing seriously, he would have realized this sooner. I was astounded by Jack's gullibility. Upon realizing he had no children with Ashley, Jack fell into despair and sat down, overwhelmed. He had always wanted children quickly and was deeply affected by this revelation. Despite everything being exposed, Ashley still insisted she was the victim, desperately asserting her innocence.
"I'm the victim here. I just want to live a happy life, but because of the alimony, I can't do what I want."
Her mother, unable to contain her anger, slapped Ashley, silencing her. The children, returning out of concern, calmly began to admonish their mother.
"Mom, you're the one at fault. You need to apologize properly."
Ashley, caught off guard by her children's words, flushed with anger but was further reprimanded by her parents and finally broke down crying.
"Why do I have to suffer like this?"
She left, dragged away by her parents, still in tears. The children, full of energy, thanked us for taking care of them and returned home. I was moved by their transformation and admired their growth. Waving goodbye to the well-mannered children, I smiled. My crying husband was taken back to his parents' home by my brother-in-law and sister-in-law. Despite his resistance, my brother-in-law easily subdued and escorted him away. I was grateful to them for their reliable support. Afterward, I successfully completed the divorce. Jack, realizing he had been deceived, began pleading for reconciliation, but I refused. His pleas of changing his ways were too late. I knew his affair had affected his company reputation, leading to a lower salary. Why should I be with someone who only saw me as a convenient woman? I informed my brother-in-law and sister-in-law about Jack's attempts to reconcile, and they assured me they would handle it. After that, I never received another email from Jack, giving me peace of mind. Once the divorce was finalized, I moved to a new place and now enjoy a peaceful life on my own. Previously, my life was disturbed by my indifferent husband and Ashley, along with their unruly children. Now, I relish the comfort of living alone. I have time to reflect on my rushed marriage. I had feared that leaving Jack would leave me without options, enduring his terrible behavior rather than considering divorce. Looking back, I regret not divorcing sooner to avoid wasting time. If I ever decide to remarry, I'll take my time to find someone truly compatible.